Hi guys, welcome. My name is Khadija Dikko and I'm a textile designer, specifically a weaver. And I'll be talking you through my work, my practice, my history, and how I started doing textiles, basically. Enjoy. Also, thank you to the huddle as well. Really cool people. So, this is me as a little child. Um, Basically, as a child, I don't think I was a very expressive child. I kind of struggled with fully expressing myself and couldn't really figure out what I liked doing or what I was good at. Um, obviously, like I was like 5 or 6 years. I wasn't expecting to figure life out then, but I remember it was something that I kind of started thinking about from a very early age. This slide was actually really, really hard to make. Of like references and things that I really liked as a child. This is kind of like when I was about 10, 8 to 10. I grew up in a Bollywood watching household. And my two favorite films growing up was Joda Akbar and Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. Um, with Joda Akbar specifically, it's kind of like a film that follows these two couple, but one thing that really stood out to me about this film was just the cinematography, but also the textiles in the film. I remember seeing it as a child and being like, wow, that's like really, really intricate. And mind you, I was watching all of this with no English subtitle. So I had no idea what they were saying. I was just trying to figure it out. And obviously grew up watching Avatar. I feel like this was probably my first like introduction to any sort of like animated film. I really loved it. I've watched it multiple times. I don't even know how many times I've watched it. And Diary of a Wimpy Kid, I watched that a lot. I read that a lot as well. And this book specifically, I feel like I remember vividly trying to draw myself because this the first page you have sort of this space that you do your self portrait, and that was quite interesting for me. I don't have a picture of what I drew, but it was absolutely horrible, like terrifying. um so my inspirations, obviously my family. This is my mother and my dad. So on their wedding day, and I remember looking at this picture and just being really, really inspired by the textiles that she wore, and the colors and sort of just how she put her fit together. So I grew up looking a lot at pictures of my family members. I lost my dad before I was born. And so I kind of learned about him through photography, all the pictures that my family members had of him. And so photography for me is very, very personal, but it's also an important part of my practice that sort of evolved without even me realizing it. It started from looking at pictures of him when I was really, really young. Um, Nigerian textiles, obviously, and just books in general that talk about Nigerian textiles, I find that it's very difficult to find like archival materials of, materials that we used to use, but also what our looms looked like, and also the textiles that we used to wear before colonialism, and also for the North specifically pre-Islam as well. And exhibitions for me are a very important part of my practice. Whenever I feel really low or I'm trying to feel inspired, I just go see exhibitions. This exhibition in particular, I saw when I was in London, and it was an exhibition about different sort of creative people in Africa, but also different photographers showing different photographs of these creative people, and also just our culture in terms of colors and textiles and things like that. So this exhibition really, really stood out to me. Um, sorry, sorry, guys. Yeah, so my art education, like I said, kind of started in secondary school for me. When I was from year seven to like year nine, I watched a lot of my peers find what they were really good at. So whether that was sports or art or like academia or, dancing, and I felt left out. Like, I can't even tell you guys the amount of times that I cried as a 16-year-old because I was like, what am I going to do with my life? And when I was in year 10, we had to pick subjects for IGCSE. And I had picked out all my subjects. Honestly, I can't remember what subjects I picked, but there was this particular block. So you have subjects in blocks and you pick the subject and you can only pick one subject. And the last block was art and physics. Obviously, I'm not doing physics. What the heck? So I ended up picking art, and I didn't pick art because I realized I was good at it or I knew that I was creative. I just picked it because I was running away from physics. And in my art class, so I did art in year 10 and year 11 as well. We played around with acrylics and we played around with gouache as well. I feel like when I was doing this, I was kind of starting to create a style for myself, which was very interesting. I was sort of heavily doing a lot of portraits of women that I found inspiring or people that I was looking at. Yara Shahidi Solange, I was listening to her album a lot at the time. Yara, because she's my age and she was just doing absolutely like amazing things at her age. And she was somebody that I really looked up to. So we had different like works that we were given, and one of the first, I think later on actually, I can't remember whether it was in year 10 or 11, we had a class about repeat patterns. And this is my first ever textiles work. I was kind of obsessed with bugs. I don't know if you can see it, but they're two grasshoppers on top of each other. I ended up picking that as a motif. It doesn't really mean anything. I don't know why I picked that, but this is a mirror repeat pattern. So it repeats like that's basically like a mirror. And the thing about repeat patterns is you have your motifs. So whether that's a circle or a grasshopper or whatever you end up picking. And the different types of repeat patterns that you have also create their own patterns as well. So, sort of like in the middle here, you can see that the two, four grasshoppers actually just chilling together, holding this blob of pink. That's not something I anticipated. It just happened when I was creating that pattern. I really, really enjoyed this project. I got to mix my own paint, which was really nice. And I remember just my teacher being like, "Oh my God, you're so good with like lines, and your lines are so neat and clean." And I think that praise that I got from him was kind of what propelled me to do textiles later on in my life. So after that, I went ahead to do A levels, and I had to pick three subjects. And I really wanted to pick textiles and art, and my parents were like, "Yeah, no, you can't do that. It's too much work. You have to pick one or the other." And because I had enjoyed the previous repeat pattern that I was showing you guys, I ended up picking textiles. Now, what I didn't know at the time was the textiles that I did at A levels was very heavy on um, textiles art rather than actually like making fabric. And this was quite interesting to me. I had to learn new techniques and I had to be in a class with people who had been literally doing textiles and not art since GCSE, and even before GCSE. And I dealt a lot with self doubt and just feeling like I didn't know what I was doing because all of these people had years of education behind them. And here I was trying to figure out how to. I also learned how to use a sewing machine. That was the first few times was I jacked that machine. It was bad. Yeah, so this is a piece that I ended up doing for my final textiles exam, and it draws inspiration from Northern culture. I'm from the North specifically, and a lot of my work draws on my personal experience, my family, but also my culture as well. And I kind of wanted to create a Boban Riga, basically is like an abada, but a different format. I didn't want it to be huge. I wanted it to be a bit fitted, but I also wanted to draw out the different geometrical patterns from the Hausa architecture. And so, what I did for my visual research for this project was I actually went to the King's Palace in Kano, and I took a ton of pictures just of anything that I found interesting. Now, those pictures are probably not very aesthetically pleasing to look at, but for me, I was trying to draw out motifs and also textures because that's very important as a textile designer. Um, yeah, so when I picked out motifs, I didn't keep a sketchbook. I don't know why. I just kind of did doodles on pages that I found and paper that I had either in my studio or in my room. I would draw out ideas and I would sort of like put arrows and try and figure out what technique I wanted that motif to be or that pattern to be. So here you can see that I pointed out and I said wax, batik, and reverse applique, and I had the colors that I wanted for this sample. And also the sample as well. I had like stencils and appliques and what I wanted it to look like. If you don't know, basically appliques are when you cut out shapes in a fabric and you stitch it onto like a flatter piece of fabric basically. So this is an example of an applique. Can kind of see the red and the blue. This you can play around. The thing about textiles that I really like is that you can play around with techniques that you have, add techniques on top of it, but also like do cutouts and stuff. So I kind of cut out this piece in the middle as well to show the background textiles for that piece. Um, this bit is stenciling that I did. The middle is embroidery because you know when people wear abada and also where they wear babariga as well, there's always some sort of embroidery as well. So I wanted that to show in this textiles piece. Yeah, so the applique is also here at the top as well. A lot of Hausa architecture have these sort of, I think they're called like dooms. They're like pointy. So I wanted that to also show in this piece as well. So yeah, that's what I did for that. This piece I feel like was a mini sample that I did. It wasn't for a project or anything, but I did this piece and I was like, yeah, I think I'm starting to get a hang of this. It made me feel really, really good. Just because of the colors and the techniques. This sort of like pattern that's in there is I got sandpaper and then put crayons on it to create the design that I wanted and then ironed it on top of the fabric. So that the the crayon that was on the sandpaper got onto the fabric. So I was able to create that texture as well. And then I had this sort of outline around the motif and wasn't really sure what to put it. And again, ended up putting a bug up there. This project is called Mops and Buckets. Um, it was a project that was given to us by our textiles teacher at the time, and she wanted us to specifically look at shapes of mops, the movement of mops, and also just the movement of the water in the bucket. And yeah, I created that piece and it got framed and got hung in the principal's office, and I think it's still there. Yeah, so this was my textiles phase at A levels. Then moving on, I would like to explain a bit more about woven textiles. So woven textiles, for those of you who don't know, is basically like ashoke, if you're familiar with ashoke. With woven textiles, it's literally the creation of fabric. So fabric can be created in many different ways through hand weaving, through knitting, or through printing. So with printed textiles, the Ankara that we wear, that's mostly the design part of it. But hand weaving and knitting specifically is a bit more technical in terms of it's actually creating whatever fabric that you want. This picture is the fabric. It's a picture that I took of the This Is Us fabric that they dye in indigo. And I wanted to show if you can see that there are pieces of yarn going. So it's going over this thread and under this thread and over this thread and under this thread. That's your basic weaving, basically. And you can do that with paper as well. So yeah, that's how you create textiles. These machines are called looms. You have different types of looms. You have table looms, you have floor looms, you have more complex looms called jacquard looms, which people use to like create stuff like, you know, fabrics for curtains or chairs or like automobiles and stuff like that. This loom that I was using is an 8-shaft loom. So your looms are called, they have these things called shafts. And these things that are shafts pick up your thread. So if you've ever seen a video of somebody doing ashoke, you see that they move their two legs together all the time, right? And so what their legs are doing is they're lifting up a set of threads, and then the other set of threads are kind of like just laying low horizontally. And when that opens, it's called a shed. And that's when you put your fabric through that shed. So then when they exchange their legs again, the threads that were under come up and the threads that were on top go to the bottom. It's a bit technical. But so instead of using your feet, you have looms. And these looms have shafts that you then move. So I have a table loom that has 8 shafts. So instead of me moving my feet, I do this thing called threading. That's too can be a bit complex basically. But you have to arrange your threads in a particular set to create the design that you want. So with weaving, you create your designs before you get on the loom, because once you get on the loom and you thread your loom up, there's really not enough room for you to play around or like change your structures. Yeah, so with these, you can see that 1, 3, 5, and 7 are lifted up. So that's the thread that's lifted up here, and these ones at the bottom are the ones that are at the bottom, and they've created this shed that I'm able to put the yarn that I want through. And you just keep doing that repeatedly over and over again to get whatever yardage of fabric you want. Obviously, not all fabric is handmade. So a lot of mills who create textiles have machine operated sort of looms that all you have to do is impute whatever design you're putting in and it would weave it for you. So you can literally weave like 50, for example, 50 yards in under like an hour instead of hand weaving it, because hand weaving takes a very long time. So then I moved on to uni and also applied to study textiles at uni because I kind of got a bit obsessed at this point. And in my first year of uni, the university that I went to, we had 3 different textile techniques. So we had printed textiles, we had woven textiles, and mixed media. Now, different universities have different textiles that they offer to people. And in your first year, I think you spend about a month working on a project in each technique. And your first year is really for experimentation. They don't really try to tie you down, but by the time you're going into your second year, you have to pick something that you specialize in. Now, this is not to say that you're not allowed to experiment with other techniques, but like that's what you specialize in, that's your main focus. And you can obviously incorporate other techniques into it. So I fell in love with weaving. By the way, I also went to uni with the idea that I wanted to become a printed textile designer because I grew up wearing Ankara quite a lot. And I was kind of disappointed when I started doing my research on printed textiles and I found out that it's actually Indonesian. and not Nigerian. And so the African soldiers that they had at Java at the time brought batik over to West Africa, and then it became a really big thing. And since then, we've had quite a lot of international brands create textiles for us, bring it back to us to sell to us. So we don't really have a lot of mills that actually create the Ankara that a lot of people wear. Nowadays is either imported from China or, like, for the higher end ones, from the Netherlands. So yeah, that was quite heartbreaking to me. And I was like, oh, okay, because I always thought that in northern Nigeria specifically, we only wear Ankara, and that's what my ancestors used to wear. And so I started thinking about what they were wearing before Ankara was introduced to them. And that's kind of how I fell in love with weaving, because I was like, well, it just put my mind off printed textiles, to be honest. And so with this project in particular, I was looking at water bottles that I had in my room that I was using. And for me, coming from an art background, I always resorted to drawing things for my visual research, not mark making. So some people who do textiles do mark making, and that usually includes getting different materials and maybe putting paint on them and trying to see what kind of texture that creates when you rub it on, whether it's fabric or cardboard or glass. But not to say that there are textile designers who don't draw, but I ended up in the category of textile designers who drew. And one of the first things that I was really hesitant about with weaving was how I could translate my drawings into hand woven textiles. And I had this tutor who was really, really nice to me, our weaving tutor, and she kind of spoke to me about how it was possible to not necessarily always create my drawings in the exact form in textiles, but how to look at different ways that I could show that. So whether that was through color or through the yarns that I use, materials, or through the structures of weaving. And I started looking into different structures. I started looking into, so the structure that I explained earlier of going under one, over one, under one is called plain weaving or tabby weave. There's so many iterations of structures that you could do, and I'll show you guys structures that I did much later in university. And so this picture is called it's called card winding. And like I told you, you have to prepare your weaving before you get on the loom. And so that includes trying to figure out what your warp is. So your warp is the thing that goes vertically. If you see them weaving ashoke, you see that they have this long, like, set of threads across from them that they kind of use like stone to tie and hold together. And that's basically like your background structure. That doesn't change when you start weaving. So you have to make sure you know what you want to do or what that's like before you start. So you can see it here that this and this and this and this all have the same warp. The only difference is I play around with the color proportions and also play around with the structures that I put into the textiles to show and to see the different ways that that interacts with the cloth. So these two samples are actually the exact same structure. So this structure only has black thread going through it, and this structure interchanges with the black and with the green thread. And if you don't look closely, you might think that there were two different designs, but it's the same thing, just different color variations. So yeah, so that's how you get to experiment with textiles, really. And it's fun. I then ended up picking weaving as my specialism, and this was a project that I did called Extraterrestrial Ashoke, and I was looking at how people used Ashoke specifically for weddings. And I had this idea of, well, this mock-up that I did of this couple who wanted their Ashoke to reflect their love, and their love for them felt out of this world. Completely made up, by the way. They're not real people. And it was also a competition that we were actually having at my school. It was the STC brief. And so basically what you could do, we had different um, competitions that were happening. So you could tailor your projects to those competitions, and you could then send your application and see if they pick you. So I kind of joined that together. This is the card winding that I was saying. This is a clearer picture than the previous one. I ended up going with this design, not these other four, but it's always really good to have as many as you can, and also just play around with your techniques and, sorry, not your techniques, your color proportions. Yeah. Another thing that I started doing as well that this project made me realize was I could mix my own paint to the shade that I wanted to dye my yarn, and have like play around with lines basically, because when you're weaving textiles, even though you have like specific colors in your mind, once the yarns actually starts interacting with each other, it changes. So if you, for example, had a really dark blue in your weaving and a really bright green, for example, in your warp, that because of that bright green, your color could be dulled down, so it can look darker than it actually is. So you have to think about these things as well before you start weaving. And for all of my projects, I dyed my yarns myself, and that was quite interesting because it wasn't something that I learned in A levels. I had to learn it in university, and we used a lot of like chemical dyes. So, for example, I used a lot of direct dyes, and it was always kind of spoken to us about how important it is that you measure your dyes correctly so that you're not putting excess dye into the environment. Even though the university had like a really good system where they could filter things out. Yeah, so for this Ashoke project as well, I discovered using food as my visual research. So, and I tried to make connections with, like I said, I was looking at different galaxies and nebulas, and I was using food as my visual research. This was, oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to. This is when I was cracking an egg. Obviously, I think I was trying to make some sort of egg. I think it was like an omelette or something. And this is also when I was buttering my pan. And I had noticed that the way the yolk broke in the bowl sort of reminded me of what like nebulas and galaxies look like, if you've ever looked at it. And also with the butter, it looked like globular clusters, and globular clusters basically are a cluster of like stars, and they kind of create, sometimes they have different patterns, but it's just these little like specks of light. And so I took pictures of that and started making drawings of that, using color, but also playing around with the proportions of the circles, and I imputed it into this system. So this is what I was saying about having computerized looms. Instead of having to, so you know how I explained that plain weaving is, it goes up and down and up and down. With, if you were trying to create a circle, for example, the first row would be under 2 threads over 1, under 5 threads under 1, just as an example. And so you have to remember, as you're lifting your shafts, you have to remember those numbers. So it becomes like a numbers thing with weaving. You have to always make sure that you know what your numbers are. And with computerized looms, you go on the software and you have, you know, like the grid paper. So you create your design in that grid, and basically the computer figures out which threads are being lifted, and all you have to do is move your legs and the computer will lift up your threads. It's amazing. So I put in a lot of structures. This particular structure obviously comes from this visual research, but I wanted to show the process that I follow of translating my visual research and my drawings into textiles. Yeah. I feel like I've spoken a lot about textiles, so I put in this slide to break it up. This other things that I do, that I express myself through. I illustrate a lot. these two illustrations I did in 2020 when I had a lot of time on my hands and I was listening to a lot of lo-fi music and also watching a lot of studio vlogs. That's also something that's very inspirational for me. And I picked up photography, specifically film photography as well, which I explored later on in my master's, which I'm going to talk through as well. And I crochet a lot. A lot of the things that I crochet are gifted to family members and to friends, or things that I use for devices. So I made that laptop sleeve. And yeah, I've kind of gotten into pottery painting. I really enjoy that. It kind of just be energizes me basically when the weaving gets too much. um Another project that explores how I moved from my progression basically from my visual research to my textiles is this project that I call the Women and Food. I'm a feminist, and I kind of wanted to draw on my inspiration of, well, not my inspiration, my own experience of what food meant to me. Growing up Northern, I heard a lot of, you need to learn how to cook so you can cook for your husband, sort of thing. And I was like, but I enjoy eating more than I enjoy cooking. And so what this project for me was highlighting that, and also just being unapologetic for whatever I felt in terms of not being in the kitchen. And there's a lot of contextual research also that goes behind my work. So a lot of looking at different artists, what they did, reading a lot of feminist manifestos, but also reading a lot of like books and seeing a lot of exhibitions that other people have done talking about these topics. I also actually interviewed two or three of my friends for this project that were all from different tribes, and I wanted to know what that was like growing up, what it was like growing up for them, and if it was the same thing that I encountered growing up. Um, all of these meals are kind of significant, some of them are not. This is a meal that I had with my housemates at the time for my 21st birthday, and it was very sweet because the day did not start out very nice. And so they took me out to go and eat some food. And yeah, so I tried to also portray what I felt. I'm not sure if you guys can feel it, but I don't try to explain that. Everybody should like come up with their own meaning and their own feelings towards whatever work that they see. And so with this project, I didn't want to focus on any structures at all. When I say structures, I mean I didn't want to create any circles on my textiles. I just wanted the highlight to be the colors and also the textures um to show, because food is very like it has texture. You know what I mean? Yeah, so I played around with gouache. I played around with collaging as well, and also just deconstructing bowls. Like I didn't want to be creating the exact same thing as the picture. Yeah, so that's what this project's about. I have a video, I think, of me. So before I played this video, this is a little bit of the process of what it takes to start weaving, from dyeing your yarns to putting your yarns on loops, on spools, to also threading the loom as well. And if you notice as well on this loom, so this is my warp, the black and white, that was very intentional because I was also looking at the way that the black warp interacted with the colors. So you can see that there's a difference between these two cloths, right? It's literally the exact same thread that I used across it. But because one is black and the other one is white, this is what I was saying about like your colors interacting with the threads that you're putting. So I'll shut up now and play the video. Yeah, so the process of dyeing takes a very long time depending on the amount of yarns that you have. I think for this project, it literally took me 2 days, like as per from 9 in the morning to late in the night. And I was practically living in the studio when I was at uni, to be honest. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this project, and it was really fun to do. And very experimental as well, very out of my comfort zone. So this is a project that I call Hadake. And Hadake is a Hausa term and it means putting your heads together. And like, this is one of the pictures about the Hausa architecture that I took of the MES Palace in Kano. I wanted to create a I wanted to create a collection of text. I did create a collection of textiles for a family room in a house. So I made up this couple again, married, thinking about having kids, and one of them is Hausa, the other one is like Igbo. And they wanted to sort of have textiles that merged both of their cultures together so their kids wouldn't feel like they're more one or the other. And I looked at Benin bronzes and just did marks that stood out to me. Same with the house architecture as well. I know obviously that they're more they're like nuances to people's cultures, but for me this was sort of like a starting point to having conversations because I'm really passionate. I feel like as Nigerians, we don't really appreciate each other and our cultures. And I feel like textiles could be a really good medium to get people to understand each other and also understand their culture because we all wear clothes. Nobody walks around naked. Yeah. So again, this is a picture of my visual research and what that turned into in terms of my textiles. So a lot of these textiles I was looking at were specifically for pillows or cushions in the family room. And I had different elements like so this blue is indigo dyeing, and I wanted to incorporate that because it's a big part of northern culture, specifically the textiles in northern Nigeria. There are these pits in Kano called Kofarmata pits, and they've been around for over like 500 years. So I wanted to incorporate that, but also pick out different structures and also different colors and merge that together. So when you look at the textiles in particular, you're not really seeing what it's about, which maybe seems like it defeats the purpose. But I think that's also part of the reason why I fell in love with hand weaving specifically because it's not in your face. Like, for example, printed textiles is mostly like designs of specific things that you can figure out, but with hand weaving you can pick out different motifs, and so it starts and it makes it more of a conversation kind of starter, and that's what I was looking for in this project specifically. Then I went on to do my master's in textiles, and specifically focused. So I did just one project mostly throughout my masters, and this project for me was about trying to bring places that felt like home to me through textiles. So I moved around quite a lot. I've lived in Kano, Kaduna, Abuja, Lagos, England, different bits and places in England, and I always made connections in wherever I went. I met people, I met family, I met people that made like a really positive impact in my life. And for at some point, it felt like I wasn't able to put all of those together. It felt like I was thinking about those places as sort of different points in my life, but I wanted to bring that together. And so that's what I focused on for my master's. So again, indigo dyeing was a very big part of that project because I wanted something from my culture to be part of the textiles. I focused on film photography, so I learned how to developed my own film, scanned my own film, started learning how to print as well, print photographs. But I didn't have enough time. I kind of ran out of time. And through that, actually, when I was at university, I was taking pictures with my housemates. I was taking pictures of my family. And so when I started this project, not only did I want it to be of photographs of London where I was living at the time, but I also wanted to have collages of different places that I had lived at. So this is an example of the collage, one of the collages that I did. The background is a place in Cornwall, and this sort of like structure, I guess, is was also a big part of like my university experience. And yeah, so I wanted to bring that together. Another thing that I really wanted was to push me to experience London um as somebody who lives like a local person, basically. And I joined a film photography group in London, and I turned up and everybody had film cameras and they were much older than me, and I was like, what is going on? And so basically they had all of these events that I think we had them every week. We would go around London and take pictures, and it also kind of pushed me to explore outside of the zone that I was living in at the time, and also make connections with these people. So this project started off with an obsession, I would call it, that started the summer before I started my master's. I was still waiting to hear back for my visa. So my mom has a lot of plants in her house. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to learn how to color match to the plants. And it was very difficult because some plants obviously have different shades in different parts of them. But I spent a really long time trying to figure it out. And so from that, I created a color palette that I had in my head at the time, that when I actually start my master's, that's what I'm going to use throughout my master's. And this is a picture of when I was dyeing. I can't remember why I was doing this dyeing, to be honest, but it was sure a color experiment. And I had mistakenly dyed two different types of textiles in the same dye bath. But this one looks a lot darker than that one, but is the exact same color, the exact same dye bath. And I was like, what is going on? So that kind of pushed me to start looking into what different colors looks like on different types of textiles because of their textures, but also um, what it looked like when it was merged with other colors as well. So again, started doing my visual research of trying to pick out my colors and what I wanted. And all of these visual research comes from photographs that I take during the summer. Sometimes I take pictures not without it's not like I have plans for them, but they eventually end up becoming part of something. This I took on a drive with my brothers. It was actually a really nice drive. We're listening to music, and I felt like we really bonded on that drive. And I took that picture outside of the car's window. And when I was doing this project, I wanted to look at pictures that I'd specifically taken when I felt happy or felt like I had taken those pictures to keep those moments. This was on a walk that I went with my friend just around Falmouth, and I found these like really cool, pretty pictures on the side. It was like a walk by the beach, and again, I tried putting different materials. So that's oil pastel and gouache, and then also that's clay as well that I pushed through a sieve. And that's so to create the flower as well, I kind of cut cardboard. Yeah. So this is the textiles that came out of this research. Again, color and weave, very, very important. These are the same structures, just different colors, and they give different effects. And that was something that I was exploring quite a lot because I just became obsessed with having an idea of something that you're trying to achieve, but also literally actually having that thing and not changing anything, but changing the color, and somehow the textiles is for something else. So whether that's for fashion or for textiles, if you have a design that you're trying to do for fashion and you change, you would be surprised. You change one color or even the shade of that color, suddenly it turns into textiles for interiors. Yeah, so that was very interesting for me. Then I started looking into indigo, like I was doing with my other projects. And I started trying to find different ways that I could create pattern within my indigo dyeing. So whether that was through resist motifs. So this I was trying to figure out the cassava paste method that they use in Adire. Is called Adire Leco. But this book that I got didn't have all the information. So my dyeing was just not coming out the way I wanted it to. I think it's what I used for this one. So you can see that the background is kind of like a sky blue. And then, sorry, the lines are like a sky blue and the background is a darker blue. I couldn't figure out how to do the cassava paste at all. So then I started doing research and found that some people use regular flour for like as a resist, and that's the sample that I did with that regular flour. And surprisingly, it ended up resisting more than the cassava, which was interesting to me. This is a technique that they do in Kano. They call it the parliament print. This is us has it. But it's basically these women who create like little ties with their finger. So they put their finger through the cloth and then they tie it and then they pull it. And then they keep going round and round and round and round. And it creates this texture. This is through stitching as well. But I was also learning indigo through a Japanese lens, so specifically shibori. And I wanted to start looking at what techniques that we use in Nigeria, because not only is indigo used in the north as well, but it's also used in the south too. So I was trying to look into that. Then I remembered my colors from the summer, and I was like, I wonder what these would look like if I put them inside indigo. And so I started this whole dye book that shows different experimentations of the colors that I was looking at and the way that they interacted with the indigo. So it goes from 5 seconds all the way to 30 minutes. Yeah, and they kind of created these like patterns, which was interesting to me because it wasn't something that I was specifically trying to achieve. And this is a video of me just doing my dyeing process. So I kind of jumped into this whole color experiment whilst also doing all the home stuff and the photo collaging and the film photography as well, because that was all part of this project. I started off with about 9 or 10 colors from my color palette, like I showed previously. So these was all of them dyed, and I started to think about what these colors would look like if they were dyed in each other. So if I dyed this blue in that color or this blue in green, what would that give me? What shade would that give me? And not only that, but I was also trying to create designs, but through the stitching method or through the tying method. And so as a weaver, naturally, I was like, it kind of feels weird to me to just go down and buy fabric and then use the fabric and tie it. When I'm a weaver, I can make fabric from scratch. So I started doing research into this thing called woven shibori. And basically, it's the same way that anybody would do tie and dye, except you're putting it in your woven structure. And so you're weaving it essentially with your cloth as you're making the cloth, instead of finishing making a cloth and then coming back and stitching it to create your design, if that makes sense. So you can sort of see these, they're called floating, they're called like floats. And it's basically when you have threads that are not actually in your structure, but in some bits are part of your structure. And I started looking into what that would look like if I dyed the fabric a plain color, tied it like this, and then dipped it in indigo. What kind of patterns would that give me? And I started getting these sort of like straight patterns. I tried creating like a circular pattern. It took a while, to be honest, to figure out how to get the specific structures that would actually show the motifs that I wanted clearly. Because you can sort of see here that um, there's a motif going like this, but then you have bits of indigo in the middle. I wasn't trying to achieve that, and that did not look cute to me. So I was like, I need to fix this. Um, and so as I was doing this, I was like, what makes sense is to again go back to me trying to put all my homes together. So I started looking at pictures that I was already putting together. So through my film photography and my collaging, and I started putting together structures from those. So this structure is actually from a house that I lived in when I was in Kaduna. I still live in it. It's my family home. No, I don't live in it, but Sha is my family home. People live in it. And sort of these structures were from where I was currently living in London. And I wanted that to be representative in the cloth. Um, sorry, can we play this? Oops, sorry, the video. Yeah, okay. So this is essentially what weaving looks like. Some people are quite fast with it. It depends on what you're doing, but I had to go a bit slowly because again, I was having floating threads over my actual structure. So I needed to make sure that all my structures were right and in the place that they needed to be. Because again, if you're not looking, sometimes when you're lifting your shafts, especially if like you're using wool, for example, they tend to stick together. So instead of having your thread go over one under one, it ends up going over one under five. And that's not on purpose, and your design looks off. So you really have to pay attention to it. I got told off so many times by my tutors because I would always watch stuff whilst creating textiles, and I never got it. But eventually, I made a mistake in one of my samples, and I was like, that's why I can't watch while weaving. But yeah, so this puts together my home. So when I showed this project, I actually had a zine that had all my photographs and also my collages, and alongside I made a dye book. So from those 9 colors that it initially started with at the beginning of this project, I ended up with over like 80 iterations of those colors that I worked with in the beginning. Yeah. Um, this is me currently. This is what I do. I work a 9 to 5, but as a textile designer, I work for this brand called This Is Us. And I'm the head of textiles and home. So this brand mainly works with indigo. And for me, coming back, that was quite interesting and something that I really wanted to further explore, because it was already something that it was a project that was building on indigo dyeing specifically in the north. A lot of the artisans that we work with are based in the north as well. So it's really interesting to see how they work and how we work with them to elevate their practice, but also the way that they live as well. And we work with a lot of women within their community too. Um, yeah, so these are some of like the snippets of what I do basically. I went on a work trip last year where I went to the weaving village called Ido, and I got to meet the weavers, got to see the yarns and how they set up their loom. And for me as a weaver, but specifically, yeah, a weaver who learned weaving not in Nigeria, it was very interesting for me to come back and see how it was being done, the issues that they had, but also how they were also surviving and using that as their livelihood, basically. We usually do like residencies for some of our artisans that are based in Kano. So they come to Lagos, especially if we have events. And there's usually a lot of prep that goes into that. So last year we had a workshop that I headed, where we experimented with screen printing, but with cassava paste. So I finally got the recipe. Um, through Fadi Kemi. She's an artist. I don't know if you guys know her, but we had this exchange where she came and she taught us her cassava paste recipe, and we kind of showed her snippets of how indigo is dyed and what it looks like to be dyeing indigo in your cassava. Because also when you're dyeing your cassava paste in your indigo, because again it's cassava, when you put it inside water, it like rubs off. You have to be really careful and take the time to dye in your indigo pit. And also because indigo is a natural dye, you don't just dip it in and bring it once and your shade has been achieved. So we have different shades, like this trousers that I'm wearing, it's like a deeper blue. Sometimes it takes them up to 8 hours to achieve the exact shade that we want, especially if it gets really dark, because you have to bring it out, dip it in. It's a whole science, basically. Because when you're making your indigo pit, you're removing the oxygen out of the pit. So when you put it in, the color is green. When you bring it out, it reacts with oxygen again, and then it turns blue. So then it's solid. It like holds onto your fabric, basically. Yeah, so I work with a lot of artisans. I work on different collections across the fashion bits and also the home collection. Last year, I worked on a really big project and we worked on textiles, home textiles specifically. And there's this room at 1616 called the Indigo Room. And I worked on that with Orma, who's the co-founder and creative director. Yeah, so worked on different designs, how to achieve that with the artisans. And also the weaving part is always really interesting to me. I love it. The printing is all kind of new to me because I don't really print, but yeah, I enjoy it. And I also wanted to put a picture of this guy dying indigo inside the pits that I drew. So we had a zine that I worked on last year when we had the launch for this collection at 16. And it was basically, we gave them out to the guests and the people who came to see the room, and it was talking them through the stages and the different designs that we did and how long it took to achieve these designs. So for the splatter print, for example, that takes about 8 women to do. So they have to because there's 3 different colorways. I don't know if you can see, it's ivory and then sky blue and then deep dark. And you have to put your cassava on first and then dye it and then put cassava on again and then dye it and put cassava on again and then dye it. And the cassava takes literally sometimes like 2 days to completely dry. Yeah, that's the end of my talk. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hi, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. And if you are subscribed, please like, comment, and share.